Misogyny, it's a hot topic right now with feminists taking to the streets all over the nation talking about this. But where does the word misogyny not quite fit in all of this? We hear the word thrown about time and time again, in the workplace especially. My guest, Carrie Lucas with the Independent Women's Forum, says we're looking in the wrong places and a silent majority of women are fed up. Take a listen to what she's got to say. Let's talk about the article you just wrote, looking for misogyny in all the wrong places. Where are we looking for it in the wrong places, and where should we be looking for it?
Well, I think a lot of times, particularly women who are kind of in the professional feminist movement, seem to be really looking for any slight, any awkward conversation, any glance that doesn't go their way, and saying, see, this is misogyny. And I wish we would be a little bit more forgiving, because I think that there's a lot of times when, people have, may say something in an imperfect fashion, but it usually isn't coming from a bad place. And I think we need to appreciate that in America, we have a lot of men who treat women awfully well. And we should appreciate that, celebrate that. It's good news. And instead focus on places that have truly real problems and where they aren't treating women fairly and where equality is still very, very distant.
Do you think that there's even in the professional setting, I know people who have met at work, dated at work, married at work, women who have flirted with men via email at work and vice versa. Do you think there's this sort of intolerance to a man expressing that he finds you attractive and you're running to tell on him instead of just confronting the issue like an adult? I mean, we see it all the time, and I know that you feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously there can be instances of real sexual harassment, and we need
Which is important to point out.
Absolutely, yeah, there's absolutely things that go on and you say that's completely out of bounds and that shouldn't happen. And I think it's important we focus our attention on those things and not say anytime a guy who makes an unwelcome or says, hey, you want to go out for drinks with me? If you can just say no.
Or even some raunchy stuff. It's like, hey,
cut it out. Exactly. If you can, as long as the guy responds in the right way, I don't think we should be trying to make a legal case out of it. There's going to be, human beings make mistakes. We need to kind of try to focus on just policing the things that are really bad and not trying to make, turn harmless stuff into a bigger deal than it needs to be.
Right. Or just say, buzz off. Thanks. And also not only to mention, there are also instances where men of a certain age in professional environments, they're never going to change. They're older, and they've had a certain approach for years. And I can see that really being an issue with women coming up in the workforce. And we've heard a lot of accusations in media and things like that about women really being held down by older men in this country. And you have to admit, that can be a valid argument. They're coming from a different culture. Do you know what I'm saying here?
Absolutely. And we should be trying to challenge that culture and change that culture. And I think that culture is changing. I mean, women who are mothers and grandmothers certainly face tremendous barriers.
Yeah,
and I think my daughters are going to be a lot better off and not face some of the hiccups that we've had to face or bumps along the road. But we shouldn't, I think, pretend that it's still a madman era when those really are now the exceptions. I think more than the rule.
Right. Uber and everyone's been talking about it. It's been mired down in controversy time and time again. The CEO has been caught, ranting and raving. One of the former, I think, software engineers had said on her blog that some man was at work was sending her raunchy messages. She went to HR. They said he's a top performer. Then she went on a blog and talked about it.
Yeah.
What's your view on business and women and going this route? What do you think is the correct route for this?
Well, I think as much as possible, you should be trying to work through the chains of command in your office. But then if you really are facing a situation where the guy's totally out of line and your company is ignoring it, then talking about it is a great way to raise awareness and to push back. It's funny because I do think that that one of the good things about a free market and having kind of the avenues that we now have is this is bad for business. Being known as a sexual harasser or not being treating women appropriately is a big stain on a company's reputation. So a lot of people, there's going to be an incentive for companies to try to correct and address those problems. And I think that surely Uber is got to be thinking hard about what they can do better.
Oh yeah, they've got to completely facelift this whole thing. Bad optics and bad base that it's got right now. Let's talk about sexism in a hot area of the country. Silicon Valley, 60%, according to a Guardian article, 60% of women in Silicon Valley experience harassment. Do you think this should be looked upon as a scale? Or, I mean, there's one woman, Ellen Powell, it was all over the media. She was suing Silicon Valley company, she wasn't being brought to the table like the men were. That judge threw that out. A lot of it. He threw a lot of that out. What do you think about this coloring the argument?
Yeah, I think you do have to be careful when you're looking at some of these surveys, because I looked at a little bit of the data, and it seemed like at first it was a pretty small pool of people that were being asked, and then they had a rather broad definition.
Yeah, typical polling errors,
exactly.
Right?
But also, what is sexual harassment? Because if it is a guy saying that you don't want to go out with, saying, you want to go out for drinks, you may have been bothered by that, but that certainly isn't the kind of sexual harassment that I think that we need to think of as like a systemic problem. Of course, it sounds like in Silicon Valley there do remain a lot of guys who are awkward.
There's the bro culture. Okay?
Yeah,
we know that's
absolutely,
going on,
sure.
guys. There's the bro culture. They're also are very young and immature in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
And I can't imagine having to operate in that environment.
Absolutely, and absolutely, and the women in that environment, they're going to have some thick skin, and we hope that the companies can change. But I think we're making such progress that having conversations like this, and I think we're on the right road, and it's important to kind of not lose sight of that.
You want to look at the sunny side of this. There's a lot of people who don't. We see things like there have been so many times I've been introduced to men who haven't looked me in the eye or they talk as if I'm not there. Okay. How are you talking? What guys are you talking? You want me to sit there and believe every time you walk out the door, every time you go to work, someone's like, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What are the most damaging arguments you see to this and women trying to get ahead professionally when we see this all over Twitter?
Yeah, well, it is. I think that trying to kind of make any time that things don't go your way into evidence of misogyny, and they don't like me because I'm a woman, that's terrible. And I think that in America, we should be really celebrating how good things are. Of course, we want to be working towards a more perfect
which is never
going
to happen.
Which is never, yeah. But we can keep making progress. But I wish that the feminist movement would spend a little more time focused on where women really are having problems. Places overseas where women don't have the right to vote, aren't allowed to drive. A so-called leader of the feminist movement recently tweeted once about women in Saudi Arabia have 10 weeks maternity leave, paid maternity leave. Who cares?
They're living maternity
who cares
leave
that
in a
they
lot
can't
of cases.
drive?
They don't get to drive or work in a lot of cases, not all of them though.
Yeah, but that's terrible. That's the kind of thing that we need to be focused on and really saying, hey, that's not fair.
Yeah, careful to compare us to Saudi Arabia, ladies. But I think it's interesting to move forward looking at this sexual harassment in the workplace, the crying wolves versus the women who are seriously having problems. And I think with Uber, it's a perfect thing to bring up right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Carrie Lucas, Managing Director of Independent Women's Forum.